The skyscraper that loomed over the city was a symbol of wealth, ambition, and ruthless competition. Inside its glossy glass walls, men and women in sharp suits rushed around like soldiers of capitalism. But among them moved a figure who didn't fit in, a man with hunched shoulders, rough hands, and a uniform that smelled faintly of bleach. His name was Arthur Hale. To most employees, he was nothing more than the old janitor, the man who carried the mop, pushed the bucket, and emptied trash bins. He was invisible, except when someone wanted to bark orders or mock him for being too slow. The CEO of the company, Richard Calloway, was especially cruel. Richard was the kind of man who believed respect was earned only through money and power. Whenever he passed Arthur in the hallways, he would sneer. "Careful with that mop, old man. Don't dirty the floor more than you already do." The younger executives laughed at their boss's jokes. Arthur would lower his head, mutter a quiet, "Yes, sir," and continue working. But what no one knew was that Arthur had a secret that even the mighty CEO would one day have to bow before. Arthur's life outside the skyscraper was simple, but filled with quiet dignity. He lived in a small rented apartment on the edge of the city with his daughter, Emily. At just 15, Emily was bright, curious, and endlessly kind. Where her father saw limitations, Emily saw possibilities. "Dad," she often told him, "you shouldn't let them talk to you like that. You're smarter than all of them." Arthur would only smile faintly. "Being smart doesn't matter in a place like this, sweetheart. People see a janitor, and that's all they'll ever see." But Emily didn't believe that. She had grown up watching her father scribble strange numbers and diagrams in old notebooks late into the night. Equations she didn't yet understand, formulas that seemed pulled out of another world. To her, he was more than a janitor. He was a man with a brilliant mind locked behind a broom. The breaking point came on a gray Monday morning. The company was buzzing with tension. Rumors spread like wildfire. An important deal with an international partner worth over $100 million was on the verge of collapse. Meetings were called. Executives shouted over one another. Piles of documents were rushed to the boardroom. Richard Calloway stormed through the corridors, his face red with fury. "If this deal falls through, we're ruined. Do you understand? Ruined." Arthur, quietly polishing the floors nearby, flinched at the anger in his voice. The meeting stretched into hours, but no matter how many expensive consultants they called, no matter how many experts pored over the figures, the deal refused to make sense. The numbers didn't add up. Somewhere, hidden deep in the contract, was a formula that didn't align. By evening, the boardroom was filled with despair. Executives pulled at their ties. Some muttered about bankruptcy. Richard slammed his fist on the table. "It's over. We've lost." And that's when Emily, who had come to pick up her father after work, peeked inside the room. Her eyes scanned the whiteboard filled with calculations. She tilted her head, studying the figures. Then, almost shyly, she whispered, "Formula Galathe. The formula is wrong." The room fell silent. Executives turned in confusion. Richard frowned, incredulous. "Who said that?" Arthur froze, panic flashing in his eyes. "Emily, don't." But it was too late. The girl stepped forward, her small finger pointing directly at the numbers on the board. "That part," she said softly, "it doesn't work. If you replace it with this—" She picked up a marker, her hand trembling, and rewrote a line of the equation. "Then everything balances." Gasps filled the room. The executives leaned forward, eyes widening as they checked her correction. Murmurs grew into exclamations. "She's right! My God, she's right!" Richard's jaw dropped. "Impossible," he muttered, grabbing the contract. But as he traced the numbers, his face drained of color. The mistake was so obvious now, so glaring that he couldn't believe none of his highly paid managers had caught it. It had taken a janitor's daughter, barely 15, to see what they couldn't. Arthur stood frozen, torn between pride and fear. He knew this moment would change everything, but he also knew Richard. The CEO's ego wouldn't allow him to accept being saved by a janitor's child. And indeed, Richard's face twisted with rage. "You," he hissed, pointing at Arthur. "You and your brat. What are you playing at? Did you plant her here to humiliate me?" The boardroom erupted in whispers. Some looked disgusted at Richard's reaction. Others were too afraid to speak. But Emily, as small as she was, stood her ground. Her eyes met Richard's with a calm fire. "I didn't come to humiliate you. I came to save you." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Arthur's heart pounded. His daughter had done the unthinkable, spoken truth to power. He wanted to shield her, to pull her away from the storm that was surely coming. But deep down, a flicker of hope stirred. For maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of the secret he had kept hidden for so long, finally coming to light.
The boardroom doors slammed shut, but the echoes of Emily's words still lingered. Executives shuffled out in stunned silence, their polished shoes tapping nervously on the marble floors. Some cast furtive glances at Arthur and Emily, their eyes filled with something strange. Was it respect or fear? Arthur gripped his mop handle so tightly his knuckles turned white. He didn't care about the executives, or even Richard Calloway at that moment. His heart was pounding because of his daughter. "Emily," he whispered, pulling her gently aside, "do you realize what you've done?" She tilted her head innocently, clutching her school bag. "I just fixed it, Dad. It was obvious." Arthur swallowed hard. To her, maybe it was obvious. To him, it was terrifying. For years, he had hidden his knowledge, buried his skills, and forced himself into obscurity. Emily's brilliance had just torn off the veil. Across the room, Richard's icy glare followed them. He remained seated at the head of the table, his fist clenched around a glass of water. "Get out," Richard said finally, his voice low and venomous. Arthur bowed his head quickly. "Yes, sir." He took Emily's hand, hurrying her toward the exit. But just before the door closed behind them, Richard's voice echoed once more. "This isn't over." Outside the towering skyscraper, the city lights blinked like watchful eyes. Arthur and Emily walked in silence. The night air was cool, but Arthur's chest burned with anxiety. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "He was angry because I was right." Arthur sighed. "He was angry because you embarrassed him in front of his empire. Men like Richard Calloway don't forgive that easily." "But Dad," Emily tugged at his sleeve, "didn't you say anything? You saw the mistake, didn't you?" Arthur froze. The truth pressed against his lips like a storm. For years, he had told himself it didn't matter anymore, that he was just a janitor, nothing more. But Emily's eyes, so sharp, so trusting, demanded honesty. "Yes," he admitted softly. "I saw it. I've seen mistakes like that for years." Emily's eyes widened. "Then why?" "Because I made a choice," Arthur interrupted. His voice carried the weight of years. "I chose to disappear, to bury who I was, to protect you." Emily frowned. "Protect me from what?" Arthur didn't answer. Not yet. The next morning, the skyscraper buzzed with new whispers. Word had spread quickly. The janitor's daughter had saved a $100 million deal. Some employees looked at Arthur differently, nodding respectfully as he passed. Others sneered, muttering about lucky guesses and cheap tricks. In the executive lounge, two managers whispered over coffee. "Can you believe it? A schoolgirl catching what we all missed? It's embarrassing. If the media hears about this..." "Richard won't let it get that far. He'll crush them." Arthur kept his head down, pretending not to hear. But inside, he knew the walls were closing in. By noon, Richard summoned him. Arthur entered the CEO's office, heart heavy. The room was a kingdom of wealth, floor-to-ceiling windows, a mahogany desk, paintings worth more than Arthur's entire life savings. Richard sat behind the desk, tapping a pen impatiently. "Sit." Arthur obeyed. Richard leaned forward, his eyes cold. "Your daughter humiliated me yesterday, but she also saved me. Do you understand the position you've put me in?" Arthur swallowed. "With respect, sir, she only spoke the truth." "Truth," Richard sneered. "Truth doesn't matter in this world. Power does. Image does." He jabbed his finger at Arthur. "And now your image is tied to you, a janitor." Arthur clenched his fists beneath the table. "So what will you do, sir? Fire me? Punish my daughter for being intelligent?" For a long moment, Richard said nothing. Then, slowly, a twisted smile spread across his face. "No, firing you would be too merciful. Instead, I'll make you prove yourself. You claim you're nothing but a janitor. Let's see if that's true. I want you and your daughter in tomorrow's board meeting. If you can solve the next crisis, maybe I'll let this go. If not," his smile hardened, "you'll wish you never walked into this building." Arthur's blood ran cold. Richard wasn't testing him. He was setting a trap. That night in their small apartment, Arthur sat silently at the kitchen table while Emily did her homework. She scribbled equations in her notebook effortlessly, humming under her breath. Arthur watched her with a mix of pride and dread. "Emily," he said finally, "tomorrow we're walking into fire. Richard won't play fair." Emily looked up, fearless. "Then let's show him we're stronger than fire." Arthur almost laughed. She reminded him so much of her mother, brave, defiant, unwilling to bow to anyone. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop hiding. He reached under the table, pulling out an old leather-bound journal. Its pages were filled with complex formulas, designs, and inventions. Emily's eyes widened. "Dad, you wrote all this?" Arthur nodded. "This is my secret. Before I was a janitor, I was an engineer, a scientist. I built systems that men like Richard made billions. And when I tried to speak out against their corruption, they buried me." Emily's breath caught. "They destroyed your career." Arthur nodded. "And now Richard will try to destroy us, too. But this time, I won't run." Emily placed her small hand over his. Her voice was steady. "Then let's fight, together." Arthur closed his eyes, his heart trembling. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of chains loosening. The janitor was about to rise, and the world had no idea what storm was coming.
The sun was barely up when Ethan Blake, the hard-edged CEO of Blake Dynamics, stormed into his glass-walled office on the 27th floor. The skyline of the city shimmered in the distance, but he barely noticed. His thoughts were consumed by the deal. $100 million partnership with Redfern Industries was on the table, one that would not only secure Blake Dynamics' future for the next decade, but also cement Ethan's reputation as one of the most ruthless and successful businessmen in the market. The problem was, the numbers didn't add up. For 3 days straight, Ethan's team of analysts and executives had pored over the documents, searching for an explanation. The projections were inconsistent, the formulas didn't balance, and the risk calculations looked wrong. Yet no one dared to admit it openly in front of him. Instead, they threw around jargon-filled explanations, trying to mask their uncertainty with confidence. Ethan, however, could smell fear and incompetence from a mile away. That morning, as the executive team gathered in the conference room, the tension was palpable. Laptops glowed, spreadsheets filled the screens, and a thick silence hung over the table until Ethan's voice shattered it. "This," he slammed his palm on the polished mahogany table, making coffee cups tremble, "is a disaster." A few executives flinched. We are 1 week away from closing with Redfern, and not one of you can tell me why these projections don't align. Do you think I built this empire by relying on half-baked answers?" He paced the length of the room, his sharp suit cutting a sleek figure, his eyes burning holes into his staff. One young manager tried to speak. "Sir, the variance could be due to market volatility." "Market volatility," Ethan snapped, rounding on him. "Don't insult my intelligence, Connor. Volatility doesn't create a 2% deviation in a fixed return formula." The manager's face turned red. Another executive, older and calmer, ventured, "Perhaps if we restructure the assumptions behind 'I don't want perhaps, I want answers, correct answers.'" Silence. No one dared continue. That was when the janitor entered. Samuel Carter, the building's senior janitor, was in his late 60s. His hair had gone white long ago, and his back bore the weight of decades of labor. Most executives barely noticed him, except to bark orders if a spill wasn't cleaned fast enough or if the trash cans overflowed. Carrying his mop and bucket, Samuel quietly slipped into the corner of the conference room, his presence as inconspicuous as wallpaper. He bent to polish a coffee stain on the carpet, careful not to disturb the meeting. But his daughter, Lily, wasn't as invisible. At just 18, Lily sometimes accompanied her father after school, helping with the evening cleaning shifts. She was bright, curious, and observant, qualities her father often told her to keep hidden in a world that dismissed janitors' families as nobodies. That morning, however, Lily had come with her father earlier than usual. She carried a worn notebook tucked under her arm, and while her father worked quietly, she sat at the far end of the room, pretending to sketch, while actually listening. From her seat, she could see the executive screens, numbers, formulas, ratios. Things most people would ignore fascinated her. She had a knack for mathematics, and her sharp young mind absorbed patterns quickly. As Ethan raged at his team, Lily tilted her head. Something was off. She squinted at one of the slides on the projector, then another. Her pen scribbled furiously across her notebook. The formula was wrong. Not slightly wrong, fundamentally wrong. A miscalculation buried deep within the structure of the projection model. Her heart pounded. Should she say something? As the meeting wound down, Ethan finally dismissed his team in disgust. "You have only until tomorrow morning. If we can't untangle this mess, the deal is dead, and so are your careers." Executives scrambled out, clutching laptops, whispering anxiously. Lily looked at her father. Samuel gave her a small shake of the head, silently warning her to stay quiet. Speaking out could mean trouble, for both of them. But Ethan lingered in the room, pacing, muttering to himself. His frustration radiated like heat. Lily's lips parted. Against her father's wishes, she whispered, "The formula's wrong." Ethan froze. Slowly, he turned, his eyes narrowing. "What did you just say?" Samuel nearly dropped his mop. "Sir, she didn't mean—" "The formula is wrong," Lily repeated, her voice steadier now. She lifted her notebook, the pages filled with scribbles and corrected equations. "The way they structured the projections, it assumes compounded growth on a flat return model. That's why it doesn't balance." The room went deadly silent. For a long moment, Ethan simply stared at her. A janitor's daughter, telling him his executives were wrong? "Show me," he demanded. Samuel tried to intervene. "Sir, please, she's just a kid." But Ethan snatched the notebook from Lily's hands. His eyes flicked rapidly across the pages. The corrections were precise, the flaws obvious once pointed out, and the recalculated outcome stunning. The deal wasn't just shaky, it was potentially catastrophic. If they had signed it as it was,
Blake Dynamics would have hemorrhaged millions within the first year. Bankruptcy wasn't just a distant risk, it was inevitable. Ethan's pulse quickened. He looked up at Lily, who sat trembling but resolute. "Who taught you this?" he asked. "No one," she admitted softly. "I just see patterns." Ethan Blake, a man who rarely showed surprise, actually smiled, if only for a flicker. "You may have just saved this company," he said. Samuel's mouth fell open. "Sir!" "Not now, Carter." He waved him off, still studying Lily with intensity. "You found what a room full of Harvard MBAs couldn't. Do you realize what that means?" Lily bit her lip. "That they were careless?" Ethan let out a sharp laugh. "Careless is an understatement." He set the notebook down, his eyes hardening into something more calculating. "From this moment on," he said slowly, "you're not just the janitor's daughter, you're my secret weapon." Samuel bristled. "She's just a girl. Don't drag her into your corporate wars." But Ethan ignored him. His mind was already racing. The executives would need to be put in their place. Redfern would need to be renegotiated from scratch. And Lily, brilliant, untrained Lily, would need to be kept close. "Tomorrow," he said finally, "you'll come back with her, and she'll sit in that meeting." Samuel opened his mouth to argue, but Ethan's voice left no room for discussion. "That's an order." The old janitor looked at his daughter, who clutched her notebook nervously. For the first time in years, Samuel felt a strange mixture of fear and pride. Because Lily wasn't just smart, she was extraordinary. And now, the most ruthless CEO in the city knew it. The next morning, Blake Dynamics' executive boardroom buzzed with nervous energy. Word had spread quickly. The $100 million Redfern deal was hanging by a thread, and Ethan Blake was in no mood for excuses. The conference table gleamed under the soft white lights. Laptops were open, charts filled the projector screen, and suits shuffled in their seats. But among the tailored Armani jackets and polished Rolex watches sat a figure that didn't belong. Lily Carter, the janitor's teenage daughter. She looked small at the far end of the table, her second-hand notebook clutched tightly in her hands, her father hovering anxiously behind her. The executives exchanged glances, whispers rippling down the line. "Why is she here?" one muttered. "Is this a joke?" another whispered. "She's the janitor's kid." Samuel Carter, mop bucket in tow, caught the sneers and bristled. He wished more than anything he could whisk Lily out of the room before she got hurt. But Ethan Blake had been adamant. And when Ethan gave an order, no one disobeyed. The glass doors slid open with a hiss, and Ethan entered, crisp suit, silver tie, eyes sharp as steel. The room immediately fell silent. He strode to the head of the table, tossed a folder onto the polished surface, and leaned forward, his hands braced firmly. "We're on the edge of collapse," he said flatly. "Redfern is reconsidering. Our competitors smell blood. If this deal dies, we lose more than money. We lose credibility." His gaze swept across the table like a laser beam. Executives squirmed under the weight of it. "And yet," Ethan's voice softened, oddly deliberate, "it wasn't any of you who noticed the flaw. It wasn't the analysts, the lawyers, or the consultants. It was her." He turned his eyes to Lily. The girl stiffened, shrinking in her chair as every pair of eyes snapped toward her. "My janitor's daughter caught what you didn't," Ethan continued, his voice razor-sharp. "And until further notice, she's earned a seat at this table." Gasps fluttered around the room. A few executives scoffed audibly. "Sir, with all due respect," one man protested, his face red. "She's a child. This is highly irregular." Irregular is watching grown men with MBAs miss what a 16-year-old caught in seconds. She stays. The meeting began. Charts flashed across the screen. Projected losses, revenue forecasts, contract stipulations. Executives spoke in jargon-filled monologues, debating endlessly, but none dared look at Lily. She listened intently, scribbling notes in her battered notebook. At last, Ethan turned toward her. "Lily," he said, "tell them what you told me last night." Her heart pounded. She looked down at her notes, then up at the sea of skeptical faces. "The formula in the pricing model," she began, her voice trembling but clear, "assumes static market volatility over a 5-year span. But volatility doesn't stay flat, it compounds. The model underestimated the risk." The room went silent. One executive scoffed. "She's parroting something she read online." Another frowned. "That's not how our model works." Lily flipped open her notebook, revealing pages filled with handwritten equations and graphs. "Actually, it is. Look here." She slid the notebook down the table. "You carried the error into all your projections. That's why Redfern panicked. Their analysts caught it." The room leaned forward as the skeptical executive examined her work. His smug expression melted into disbelief. She's right." Suddenly, the energy in the room changed. Where there had been derision, there was now unease. Lily pressed on, her voice steadier. "If you restructure the deal to factor in variable volatility and adjust the hedge accordingly, the risk profile improves. Redfern won't see it as reckless anymore. They'll see it as cautious, smart." Ethan's lips curved into the faintest smirk. "Ladies and gentlemen, our janitor's daughter just saved a $100 million deal." A stunned silence followed. Some executives looked furious, others ashamed. A few grudgingly impressed. But not everyone was ready to accept her. "This is absurd," barked a senior VP. "She doesn't belong here. She's a child from a janitor's family. Do you really expect us to take strategic advice from her?" Ethan's gaze snapped toward him. "I expect you to take advice from anyone who's smarter than you," he said icily. The VP went pale and sank into his seat. As the room emptied, Lily sat frozen, her notebook still open in front of her. Executives passed her with wary glances. Some ignored her entirely. Others shot her looks that dripped with quiet resentment. But Ethan lingered, studying her carefully. "You've got a sharp mind," he said finally, "and sharp minds don't come around often." Lily swallowed hard. "I just wanted to help." Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder, pride brimming in his tired eyes. Ethan nodded. "You didn't just help. You changed everything. From now on, you'll be in these meetings, whether they like it or not." His father's eyes widened. "Mr. Blake, with respect, she's just a kid. She has school, a life. She doesn't need this kind of pressure." Ethan's gaze flicked toward him, then softened. "Samuel, she's got more potential than most of the people running this company. Don't clip her wings before she's learned to fly." Samuel hesitated, torn between fear and pride. Lily looked at Ethan, then at her father. Her voice was small, but steady. "I want to learn. I can do this." Not everyone was pleased with Lily's sudden rise. In hushed corridors and late-night emails, resentment brewed. Some executives grumbled that Ethan had lost his mind. Others whispered darker things, about Samuel, about Lily, about how long they'd tolerate this humiliation. At one corner of the building, the senior VP who'd been embarrassed in the meeting leaned against his office window, his jaw tight. He muttered into his phone. "She's a threat, A janitor's brat sitting at the table? It undermines all of us. We need to do something." A chilling silence followed on the other end. Then a low voice replied, "Don't worry. We will." That evening, Samuel found Lily sitting on the rooftop of their old apartment building, her notebook in her lap. "You were amazing today," he said, lowering himself beside her. She gave a faint smile. "I was terrified. They all hate me." "They don't hate you," Samuel said gently. "They hate what you represent. You proved them wrong. That scares people." Lily looked down at her hands. "Do you think Mr. Blake really believes in me? Or am I just a novelty?" Samuel thought carefully before answering. "A man like him doesn't waste time on novelties. If he sees something in you, it's real. But promise me, Lily, don't let this world change who you are." She nodded, tucking the notebook under her arm. "I won't." Far above them, the city skyline glittered, 1,000 lights burning against the night. But in the shadows, unseen, resentment was gathering strength. Resentment that would soon test both Lily's brilliance and her courage. The corridors of Blake Dynamics seemed colder in the days that followed Lily's shocking debut in the boardroom. On the surface, everything looked the same. Executives carrying their briefcases, assistants juggling coffee trays, the janitorial staff quietly mopping floors. But beneath the polished veneer, something toxic had begun to fester. Not everyone could accept that a janitor's daughter had corrected their mistakes, and not everyone forgave the humiliation Ethan Blake had dealt them. In the executive lounge, a hushed conversation took place. "Did you see how he paraded her in there, like she's some kind of prodigy?" sneered Victor Hale, the senior VP who'd been publicly embarrassed. Across from him, a few allies shifted uneasily. "She was right, Victor. The formula was wrong." Victor slammed his glass onto the marble counter. "That's not the point. She made us look incompetent. Blake is treating her like royalty, while we, seasoned executives, are left groveling. It's an insult." One man lowered his voice. "Careful, if Blake hears." Victor leaned closer, his tone sharp. "Blake won't hear. But mark my words, if we let this girl worm her way deeper, we'll all be answering to a janitor's kid. I won't allow it." His allies exchanged wary glances. A storm was gathering, and they were being dragged into it whether they liked it or not. Meanwhile, Lily sat in her tiny bedroom at home, paper scattered across her desk. Her battered notebook had grown thicker with new notes, graphs, equations, even hand-drawn diagrams of business models she barely understood a month ago. Her father peeked in, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. "You're still at it?" Samuel asked, his tired smile tinged with concern. Lily sighed. "I have to. Tomorrow there's another meeting. If I mess up, they'll say I was a fluke. They'll say I don't belong." Samuel set the mugs down and crouched beside her. "You don't have to prove anything to them. You've already proven who you are." "No, Dad. I have to prove it again and again until they can't deny it anymore." His chest tightened. He saw the same fire in her eyes that her mother once had, a brilliance that refused to be hidden. But he also saw the weight pressing down on her small shoulders, and it terrified him. The next day, the boardroom was tense. Redfern's legal team had sent back a revised contract, one that could make or break the deal. Ethan stood at the head of the table, silent as his executives argued. "They're lowballing us." "No, they're testing us. If we push back too hard, they'll walk." "We can't afford to look desperate." The voices clashed like swords until Ethan raised his hand. Silence fell. He turned to Lily. "What do you think?" Every head swiveled toward her. Her fingers gripped her notebook. She swallowed hard, then spoke.
They're not lowballing, they're baiting. Confused frowns filled the room. Lily explained, her voice steadier with each word. By offering less, they want to see if you'll panic. If you accept too quickly, they'll know you're desperate. If you refuse outright, they'll know you're reckless. The answer is balance. Counter with a moderate figure and frame it as strategic caution. That way you look confident, not weak. Ethan's eyes gleamed. Exactly. The room erupted into whispers. Executives scribbled notes. One muttered under his breath, "How does she know all this?" Victor Hale's jaw clenched. His plan to discredit her was unraveling fast. Later that night, Victor met with two allies in his office. "This is spiraling out of control. She's influencing Blake's decisions. If this continues, she'll be untouchable." One ally hesitated. "But what can we do? If we go against Blake?" Victor's eyes narrowed. "Then we don't go against Blake. We go against her." He leaned back, his tone chilling. "Everyone has secrets, and I intend to find hers." At home, Lily opened her laptop to review case studies. But when she logged into her school email, a new message caught her eye. Subject: "Stay in your place." Body: "You don't belong at that table. Go back to cleaning floors with your father, or next time it won't just be whispers." Her breath hitched, her fingers trembled as she showed the screen to Samuel. He paled, anger flashing in his eyes. "They're trying to scare you." She bit her lip, fighting back tears. "It's working." Samuel wrapped his arms around her. "Don't let them win, Lily. Fear is what they want." But deep down, he was terrified, because he knew fear had teeth, and it was only a matter of time before it bit. The next day, Ethan summoned Samuel to his office. The CEO's usual sharpness was tempered with something more personal. "Your daughter has enemies," Ethan said bluntly. "Powerful ones. People who feel threatened by her." Samuel's hands curled into fists. "Then protect her. You're the CEO. You can stop this." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I can protect her here, but beyond these walls," he shook his head, "I can't shield her from everything. You need to prepare her." Samuel stared at him, torn between gratitude and fury. "She's 16. She should be worrying about exams, not corporate sabotage." Ethan's eyes softened. "Greatness doesn't wait for permission. She has it, whether you like it or not." Despite the threats, Lily pressed on. In the following meeting, she presented a simplified model that restructured the deal. Her clear explanations cut through the noise of jargon and egos, leaving even the most hardened executives stunned. When the call with Redfern ended, Ethan turned to the board. "Ladies and gentlemen, the deal is back on track, and you have Lily Carter to thank." Reluctant applause filled the room. Even those who despised her couldn't deny the truth anymore. But as Lily smiled shyly, a storm brewed in the shadows. Because while she was earning respect, she was also painting a target on her back. That night, Victor Hale stood alone in the parking garage, speaking quietly to his phone. "She's becoming dangerous. Blake trusts her too much. If we don't stop her soon, it'll be too late." The voice on the other end replied coldly, "Then it's time to remind her and her father where they really belong." Victor's lips curled into a cruel smile.
The city skyline glittered outside Blake Dynamics' towering headquarters, but inside, the mood was far from bright. For Lily Carter, the janitor's daughter who had shocked the boardroom, life had become a balancing act between school, studies, and survival in a world that didn't want her. Every day she sat at the long oak conference table, her notebook open, listening intently. She was no longer invisible. She was the lightning rod. And lightning attracts storms. It started small. One morning, Lily's locker at school was vandalized. Spray-painted in red were the words, "Janitor's trash." Her classmates whispered and giggled as she walked past, clutching her books tightly. She didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. But her father saw the damage when he picked her up that evening, and his heart broke. That same week at Blake Dynamics, she was about to present slides when her laptop flickered, and every file she had carefully prepared vanished. Deleted. Gasps spread across the boardroom. Victor Hale smirked behind his coffee cup. Ethan Blake's sharp eyes darted at Lily. What happened? She swallowed, panic rising. I don't know. Everything was there last night. But before the humiliation could deepen, Samuel Carter, standing quietly at the back, stepped forward. She backed them up on a USB. Right, Lily? Lily blinked in surprise, then nodded quickly. Samuel handed her the small drive he'd slipped into his pocket that morning, because he'd seen the tampered files on her laptop and suspected foul play. The slides loaded perfectly. Lily carried on, her voice steady even as her knees shook under the table. She had survived the first real strike, but it wouldn't be the last. Victor Hale sat in his office late that night, staring at the city below. His temper had reached boiling point. "How does she keep slipping through my fingers?" he snarled. His assistant hesitated. "She's resilient. Maybe it's time to—" "Don't tell me to stop," Victor snapped. He lowered his voice, eyes dark. "If Blake won't see her for what she is, then I'll make him. Tomorrow's presentation will destroy her." He topped a folder on his desk, forged documents, manipulated numbers, carefully designed to make Lily look incompetent. The following day, Lily and her father arrived early. She carried her notebook, her hair neatly tied, determination in her eyes. As they stepped into the elevator, it jolted violently. The lights flickered, then went dark. The box shuddered to a halt between floors. Lily gasped, clutching Samuel's arm. "Stay calm," he said, though his voice was tight. He pressed the emergency button, but no response came. Minutes stretched into an hour. Sweat beaded on their foreheads. The air grew heavy. "This isn't normal," Samuel muttered. He pounded on the door. No answer. Lily's heart raced. Deep down, she knew this wasn't an accident. Finally, maintenance pried open the doors and pulled them out. They stumbled into the hallway, shaken. But when Lily entered the boardroom later, Victor Hale's smirk told her everything she needed to know. Later that afternoon, as Lily packed her notebook, a slip of paper fluttered to the floor. She bent to pick it up. Scrawled in jagged handwriting were the words, "Stay out of this, girl, or next time your father won't walk away." Her blood turned to ice. That evening, Samuel stormed into Ethan Blake's office, slamming the note onto his desk. "Enough!" Samuel's voice shook with rage. "My daughter is being threatened, humiliated, nearly killed, and all because she spoke the truth in your boardroom." Ethan picked up the note, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "I'll handle this," Ethan said coldly. "I swear on everything I've built, whoever's behind this will regret it." But Samuel shook his head. "Handling it isn't enough. She's 16, Blake. She's a child. She doesn't deserve this war." Ethan leaned forward, his voice a low growl. "Genius is rarely born in peace, Carter. The world fears brilliance, especially when it comes from the unlikeliest place. But I promise you this, Lily will not stand alone." The sabotaged deal. Days later, the Redfern contract came up for signing. The boardroom was tense as lawyers, executives, and the CEO himself prepared for the final review. Victor Hale sat with a satisfied smirk,
waiting for Lily's downfall. He had swapped figures in the spreadsheet she would present. If she read them out loud, she'd be exposed as careless, or worse, fraudulent. But Lily's eyes caught the irregularity mid-sentence. Her heart raced. The numbers, they don't match what I wrote. She froze for a split second, then turned the screen off. I'm sorry, Mr. Blake, but I cannot present these numbers. They've been altered. Gasps erupted across the boardroom. Victor stood, feigning outrage. She's covering for her incompetence. This is ridiculous. Lily turned, her gaze steady. Check the metadata. You'll see the edits weren't mine. Ethan's jaw tightened. He motioned to IT. Within minutes, the truth was revealed. The files had been tampered with from Victor Hale's login. The boardroom exploded. Executives shouted. Victor tried to defend himself, but Ethan's voice thundered over the noise. Get out of my company. Security escorted Victor away, his face pale with fury. That night, Lily sat at her desk at home, staring at her notebook. The threats still haunted her, but she had stood her ground. She had faced down one of the company's most powerful men and survived. Samuel entered quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. You were incredible today, he whispered. She looked up at him, her eyes tired but determined. Dad, it's not over, is it? Samuel hesitated. No, men like Victor don't give up. But you, he smiled faintly, you're stronger than they'll ever be. Lily leaned against him, exhaustion washing over her. In the shadows of the city, Victor Hale sat alone in a dimly lit bar, nursing a drink. His career at Blake Dynamics was finished, but his hatred burned hotter than ever. This isn't over, he muttered into his glass.
The world outside Blake Dynamics carried on with its glittering chaos. Markets shifting, skyscrapers rising, fortunes made and lost overnight. But in a quiet corner of the city, one man nursed a wound deeper than bankruptcy. Humiliation. Victor Hale sat in the dim light of his penthouse, whiskey glass in hand. His reflection in the tall window mocked him. Once a celebrated executive, now a disgraced outcast. The memory of being dragged out by security replayed endlessly, his humiliation amplified by whispers spreading across the corporate world. Because of her, he muttered, slamming the glass onto the table. Shards scattered, amber liquid soaking into the rug. Because of a janitor's brat. Hatred had replaced reason, and hatred, Victor believed, was sharper than any strategy. Victor reached out to contacts he had kept for years. Journalists hungry for scandal. Hackers who thrived on chaos. Rivals who envied Ethan Blake's empire. One by one, he fed them poison. She's no genius, he told a tabloid reporter over the phone. That girl plagiarized formulas. You think a janitor's daughter just knows international finance? No, she's a fraud, and I can prove it. To a hacker, he whispered, Find me her school records, twist them, make it look like she cheated her way through every exam. To a rival CEO, Blake has lost his mind. He's letting a 16-year-old girl into billion-dollar meetings. Invest in me instead. I'll give you Blake's secrets. The city, always hungry for gossip, began to stir. It started with a headline. Janitor's daughter or corporate puppet? Questions rise at Blake Dynamics. Then another. Is Ethan Blake losing control of his empire? By the third week, Lily's face was plastered on TV screens, not as a prodigy, but as a controversy.
Clips of her whispering the formula were replayed alongside sneering commentary. Too convenient, too rehearsed. At school, the whispers returned, louder this time. She's a fraud. She hacked the system. Her dad probably bribed someone. Lily walked the hallways with her head high, but her hands trembled when she opened her locker to find it stuffed with shredded newspapers, all circled around her picture. One evening, Samuel Carter returned home to find Lily staring blankly at the TV. "Turn it off, sweetheart," he said gently. Her eyes were glassy. "They hate me, Dad. They think I cheated. They think you—" Her voice cracked. "They think you bribed someone." Samuel clenched his fists, fury rising. He had endured decades of humiliation, mopping floors while executives sneered. He could take it when the world mocked him. But mocking his daughter? Tearing her down for daring to be brilliant? That was unforgivable. "Listen to me," he said firmly, kneeling in front of her. "They can say what they want. You know the truth, I know the truth, and Ethan Blake knows the truth. That's all that matters." Lily shook her head. "It's not enough anymore, Dad. He's destroying everything. And if I don't stop him, he'll destroy you too." The next morning, Lily and Samuel were summoned to Ethan Blake's office. The CEO stood by the window, tablet in hand, face grim. "Victor's playing a dangerous game, but games can be won." He swiped the screen and turned it toward them, an investigative file. Photos, transactions, and names linked Victor to several scandals, from insider trading to bribery. "I've kept this buried for years, but now we fight back." Samuel frowned. "Exposing him will make him desperate." Ethan's eyes hardened. "Good. Let him be desperate. Desperation makes men reckless, and when he's reckless, we'll end him." Lily sat quietly, staring at the evidence. She wasn't sure if she wanted to see Victor destroyed, or if she just wanted him to leave her alone. But deep down, she knew there was no going back. That night, Lily received an anonymous email. The subject line read, "I know the truth about Victor. Meet me." Attached was a document filled with financial records that could expose Victor's corruption even further. She hesitated. Could this be the break we need? Samuel warned her, "It's a trap. He wants you vulnerable." But Lily, stubborn as ever, insisted. "If I don't go, he wins. If I do, we might end this once and for all." So she agreed to meet in a small, dimly lit cafe on the edge of town. A hooded figure slid into the booth across from her. His laptop glowed faintly. "You want Victor Hale gone? Then help me. Give me access to Blake Dynamics' internal servers. With that, we can finish him." Lily's stomach twisted. "That's illegal. That's dangerous." The man smirked. "So is survival." She rose abruptly, her chair scraping. "No, I won't destroy my future to fight him." But as she left, she couldn't shake the feeling. Victor was escalating, and this was only the beginning. 2 days later, Samuel returned home late from work. He found the front door slightly ajar. His pulse spiked. Inside, the living room was untouched, except for one thing. On the table lay a small velvet box. Inside, nestled in silk, was a single broken piece of chalk. A note beneath it read, "She saved Blake with a formula. Let's see if she can save you." Samuel's hands shook as he read the words. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. It was a promise. Lily sat in her bedroom that night, staring out at the city lights. She felt both fragile and fierce, like glass holding fire. "They want me to break," she whispered to herself, "but I won't." Outside, storm clouds gathered over the skyline, lightning flashing in the distance. Victor Hale was no longer just a disgraced executive. He was a man with nothing left to lose. And men like that, Lily knew, were the most dangerous of all.
The storm that had rumbled over the city finally broke. Rain pounded the streets, rivers of water rushing through gutters, thunder splitting the sky. Inside Blake Tower, however, another kind of storm was brewing. Ethan Blake had called for a grand shareholders' conference, one of the biggest of the year. Every seat in the vast hall was filled. Investors, journalists, and rivals from across the world. It was the perfect stage to show stability after weeks of Victor Hale's smear campaign. On stage, a massive screen glowed with the Blake Dynamics logo. At its center stood Ethan, tall and commanding. To his right sat Samuel Carter, dressed not in his janitor's uniform, but in a crisp suit that Ethan had insisted he wear. And beside Samuel was Lily, calm on the outside, though her heart thudded in her chest. This was her first time before the public eye since the scandal broke. She knew every camera was watching, every lens ready to catch the smallest slip. Halfway through Ethan's speech, an inspiring message about truth, resilience, and innovation, the heavy doors at the back of the hall slammed open. Gasps rippled through the audience. Victor Hale strode in, drenched from the rain, his suit disheveled, but his eyes burning with unhinged fury. Security guards moved toward him, but he raised a hand, and with him came an entourage of reporters and cameramen he had invited. "You call this stability?" Victor's voice boomed across the hall. "You call this leadership? Putting your empire in the hands of a janitor's brat?" His words echoed, amplified by the microphones. The crowd murmured, tension rising. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Remove him." But Victor had anticipated that. He thrust up a folder, waving it like a weapon. "Before you drag me out, maybe your shareholders deserve to see the truth." On stage, a massive screen glowed with the Blake Dynamics logo. At its center stood Ethan, tall and commanding. To his right sat Samuel Carter, dressed not in his janitor's uniform, but in a crisp suit that Ethan had insisted he wear. And beside Samuel was Lily, calm on the outside, though her heart thudded in her chest. This was her first time before the public eye since the scandal broke. She knew every camera was watching, every lens ready to catch the smallest slip. Halfway through Ethan's speech, an inspiring message about truth, resilience, and innovation, the heavy doors at the back of the hall slammed open. Gasps rippled through the audience. Victor Hale strode in, drenched from the rain, his suit disheveled, but his eyes burning with unhinged fury. Security guards moved toward him, but he raised a hand, and with him came an entourage of reporters and cameramen he had invited. "You call this stability?" Victor's voice boomed across the hall. "You call this leadership? Putting your empire in the hands of a janitor's brat?" His words echoed, amplified by the microphones. The crowd murmured, tension rising. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Remove him." But Victor had anticipated that. He thrust up a folder, waving it like a weapon. "Before you drag me out,
Maybe your shareholders deserve to see the truth." On stage, the massive screen glowed with the Blake Dynamics logo. At its center stood Ethan, tall and commanding. To his right sat Samuel Carter, dressed not in his janitor's uniform, but in a crisp suit that Ethan had insisted he wear. And beside Samuel was Lily, calm on the outside, though her heart thudded in her chest. This was her first time before the public eye since the scandal broke. She knew every camera was watching, every lens ready to catch the smallest slip. Halfway through Ethan's speech, an inspiring message about truth, resilience, and innovation, the heavy doors at the back of the hall slammed open. Gasps rippled through the audience. Victor Hale strode in, drenched from the rain, his suit disheveled, but his eyes burning with unhinged fury. Security guards moved toward him, but he raised a hand, and with him came an entourage of reporters and cameramen he had invited. "You call this stability?" Victor's voice boomed across the hall. "You call this leadership? Putting your empire in the hands of a janitor's brat?" His words echoed, amplified by the microphones. The crowd murmured, tension rising. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Remove him." But Victor had anticipated that. He thrust up a folder, waving it like a weapon. "Before you drag me out, maybe your shareholders deserve to see the truth." On stage, a massive screen glowed with the Blake Dynamics logo. At its center stood Ethan, tall and commanding. To his right sat Samuel Carter, dressed not in his janitor's uniform, but in a crisp suit that Ethan had insisted he wear. And beside Samuel was Lily, calm on the outside, though her heart thudded in her chest. This was her first time before the public eye since the scandal broke. She knew every camera was watching, every lens ready to catch the smallest slip. Halfway through Ethan's speech, an inspiring message about truth, resilience, and innovation, the heavy doors at the back of the hall slammed open. Gasps rippled through the audience. Victor Hale strode in, drenched from the rain, his suit disheveled, but his eyes burning with unhinged fury. Security guards moved toward him, but he raised a hand, and with him came an entourage of reporters and cameramen he had invited. "You call this stability?" Victor's voice boomed across the hall. "You call this leadership? Putting your empire in the hands of a janitor's brat?" His words echoed, amplified by the microphones. The crowd murmured, tension rising. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Remove him." But Victor had anticipated that. He thrust up a folder, waving it like a weapon. "Before you drag me out, maybe your shareholders deserve to see the truth." On stage, a massive screen glowed with the Blake Dynamics logo. At its center stood Ethan, tall and commanding. To his right sat Samuel Carter, dressed not in his janitor's uniform, but in a crisp suit that Ethan had insisted he wear. And beside Samuel was Lily, calm on the outside, though her heart thudded in her chest. This was her first time before the public eye since the scandal broke. She knew every camera was watching, every lens ready to catch the smallest slip. Halfway through Ethan's speech, an inspiring message about truth, resilience, and innovation, the heavy doors at the back of the hall slammed open. Gasps rippled through the audience. Victor Hale strode in, drenched from the rain, his suit disheveled, but his eyes burning with unhinged fury. Security guards moved toward him, but he raised a hand, and with him came an entourage of reporters and cameramen he had invited. "You call this stability?" Victor's voice boomed across the hall. "You call this leadership? Putting your empire in the hands of a janitory brat?" His words echoed, amplified by the microphones. The crowd murmured, tension rising. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Remove him." But Victor had anticipated that. He thrust up a folder, waving it like a weapon. "Before you drag me out, maybe your shareholders deserve to see the truth." On stage, a massive screen glowed with the Blake Dynamics logo. At its center stood Ethan, tall and commanding. To his right sat Samuel Carter, dressed not in his janitor's uniform, but in a crisp suit that Ethan had insisted he wear. And beside Samuel was Lily, calm on the outside, though her heart thudded in her chest. This was her first time before the public eye since the scandal broke. She knew every camera was watching, every lens ready to catch the smallest slip. Halfway through Ethan's speech, an inspiring message about truth, resilience, and innovation, the heavy doors at the back of the hall slammed open. Gasps rippled through the audience. Victor Hale strode in, drenched from the rain, his suit disheveled, but his eyes burning with unhinged fury. Security guards moved toward him, but he raised a hand, and with him came an entourage of reporters and cameramen he had invited. "You call this stability?" Victor's voice boomed across the hall. "You call this leadership? Putting your empire in the hands of a janitor's brat?" His words echoed, amplified by the microphones. The crowd murmured, tension rising. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Remove him." But Victor had anticipated that. He thrust up a folder, waving it like a weapon. "Before you drag me out."
The storm had passed, but the city was still drenched. Streets glistened under the soft glow of street lamps, and puddles reflected skyscrapers stretching into the heavens. Inside Blake Tower, however, a different light shone, a light of triumph. Lily Carter sat in the executive office, her hands folded in her lap, staring out at the skyline. For the first time, she felt a sense of belonging here, not as the janitor's daughter, not as an outsider, but as someone who had proven her worth. Her father, Samuel, stood nearby, adjusting his tie awkwardly. Suits had never suited him. "Never thought I'd step into this office without a mop," he muttered. Ethan Blake chuckled, pouring himself a glass of water. "Get used to it, Samuel. After what you two did, this company owes you more than gratitude." Later that evening, Blake Tower's atrium filled with people. Employees, board members, even rival firms who had come to witness the rebirth of a company nearly destroyed by Victor Hale. The press swarmed the space, flashes going off as Ethan took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "tonight we celebrate not just a company saved, but the spirit that saved it. Integrity, humility, and courage, the values we thought had been lost in business halls like these. But thanks to Lily and Samuel Carter, we are reminded that greatness can come from anywhere." The crowd erupted in applause. Ethan motioned, and Lily hesitantly stepped forward. She had never spoken before such a crowd. Cameras zoomed in, microphones pointed at her. She clutched her notes tightly, then took a breath. "I don't have a business degree. I don't have the money or power most of you grew up with. But what I do have is a father who taught me that no job is beneath anyone, and no person is beneath respect. He spent years cleaning these halls so that people like you could walk proudly in them. And tonight, I just hope I made him proud." Samuel wiped a tear, though he tried to hide it. The audience clapped thunderously, some even standing to their feet. But in the shadows of the crowd, danger still lurked. Victor Hale had slipped past security, his disheveled figure blending with the throng of reporters. His face was pale, twisted with rage. His empire was gone, his reputation in ruins, but he had one last plan. Inside his coat pocket was a USB drive. On it, he claimed, was evidence that would destroy Blake Dynamics once and for all. Of course, it was nothing more than another forgery,
But Victor believed that he could upload it during the celebration, in front of the press. He could sow enough chaos to drag them all down with him. As Ethan introduced Samuel to speak, Victor moved silently toward the main server access door at the side of the atrium. His eyes darted, his breath quickened. But he wasn't unseen. Lily noticed first. She had been scanning the crowd nervously and caught sight of the familiar figure moving like a shadow. Her stomach dropped. She leaned toward her father. "Dad, look!" Samuel followed her gaze, his heart sinking. Victor. Without hesitation, Samuel moved. For years, people had underestimated him. Slow, invisible, just a janitor. But tonight he moved with the speed of a man with something priceless to protect. He intercepted Victor just as he reached the server door. "It's over, Hale," Samuel said firmly. Victor's eyes narrowed. "Get out of my way, old man." Samuel shook his head. "No, you've ruined enough lives already. You won't ruin hers." Victor snarled, shoving Samuel back. Years of bitterness fueled his strength. Samuel stumbled but regained his footing, blocking the door again. "Merv!" Victor roared, swinging a fist. Samuel ducked, the blow grazing his shoulder. Pain shot through him, but he stood tall, refusing to yield. Suddenly, the crowd began to notice. Cameras turned, capturing the scuffle. Gasps filled the atrium. And then, Lily's voice rang out. "Stop!" She stepped forward, her voice echoing across the space. "Victor Hale, you think power means destroying people smaller than you. But the truth is, power is protecting them. My father has more strength in standing here against you than you ever had with your millions." The hall fell silent. Every eye was on them. Victor froze, her words cutting deeper than he expected. He looked at the crowd, realizing too late that the cameras were on him, recording every second of his humiliation. Desperation twisted into madness. He lunged again, but this time security swarmed, tackling him to the floor. The USB drive clattered, skidding across the polished tiles. Journalists surged forward, snapping pictures as Victor was dragged away, screaming, "You'll regret this! You'll all regret this!" But no one believed him anymore. This time, Victor Hale's empire wasn't just gone. His voice, his influence, his fear, it was all gone too. When the atrium finally calmed, Samuel and Lily stood together at the center. Ethan approached, retrieving the USB drive and holding it up. "This," he announced, "is nothing but a lie, and tonight we witness truth triumph over lies once again." The crowd roared. Ethan turned to Samuel and Lily. "I owe you both everything, and from this day forward, you're not just part of this company, you're part of its legacy." Weeks later, life had changed. Samuel returned to work, but not as a janitor. Ethan had insisted he take on a new role, head of employee relations. Who better, Ethan had said, to ensure every worker here is treated with dignity than the man who lived it? Lily, meanwhile, began interning with the research team. Her sharp mind and fearless voice quickly made her indispensable. She had gone from the janitor's daughter to a symbol of hope for the entire company. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Samuel and Lily stood together on the rooftop of Blake Tower, watching the city lights twinkle. "You know," Samuel said softly, "for years I thought my life didn't matter much, just cleaning up after people who never noticed me. But tonight I realized something." "What's that, Dad?" Lily asked. He smiled. "Every small act matters. Every job has dignity. And sometimes, even a janitor's secret can change the world." Lily leaned her head against his arm, smiling through tears. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, kiddo." Above them, the stars broke through the clouds, shining brighter than ever.